More election news. I want to continue in the Senate. We talked to Joe Sestak a few months ago. I felt really good about Joe Sestak's campaign. And early on last night, it seemed that he was going to win. No such luck. There was a turnaround with the later counties that were tallied, and Pat Toomey won. I kid you not. This is the former Club for Growth derivatives trader, Pat Toomey, who won. After derivatives are the subject of controversy, and they're at the center of the collapse of many financial institutions' scruples and their profits, the guy in charge of derivatives for a conservative group wins. Disappointing, Lewis, and certainly an indicator of the pulse of the election. Also, Marco Rubio won in Florida. Let's take a look at a little bit of his acceptance speech. And this was a three-way race. And you know what? In the end, we were thinking that the three-way component was going to possibly swing the election. Rubio got over 51% of the vote by himself.
Marco Rubio is offering his victory speech. Let's take a listen.
Collected their allowance, which was largely quarters and single-dollar bills, and handed it to me. I didn't tell them that. They overheard me. And it was in that moment that I was reminded of what this race and election was really all about. It was not about any of our individual ambitions, but it was about the future, as represented by them and their generation.
So Marco Rubio winning there. And bizarre moment with Marco Rubio that I noticed, Wolf Blitzer, after they watched some of his speech, referred to Marco Rubio, the Republican Senate winner in Florida, as very attractive. And it was really a little bit awkward, I have to say. It was one of the stranger moments in CNN's election night coverage.
Wolf Blitzer says a lot of weird things, though.
He does. He does say a lot of weird things. And, okay, so Joe Miller and Ken Buck, we're still waiting on those. Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold, who had the courage to vote against the Patriot Act, against essentially what everybody was doing at the time, lost to Ron Johnson. So that's not good. I want to move on to the governor's races, and then there's so much to follow up on in terms of what is next here in the United States. A lot of people are not talking about Republican gains in governorships, which as we go to air is about +9 right now. And that's a big deal. For whatever reason, it's not making the same headlines. We did get, fortunately, in California, Meg Whitman did not win. And Jerry Brown is back to being the governor of California. But the governor, at a different level, these governor's races are just as or more important in terms of what goes on in each individual state. And here in Massachusetts, it was close, Lewis. Deval Patrick, the Democrat who was up for re-election, it was not clear even until probably 9 p.m. yesterday that he was going to win re-election against Charlie Baker. Again, just an indicator of just how risky the situation was to Democrats.
Right. But of course, Massachusetts has a long history of Republican governors.
That's right. It wouldn't have been unprecedented in the sense that even when the entire country wasn't voting for Republicans, Massachusetts has often voted for Republican governors.
No.
It would have just added more and more to the claim for sure. Now, I think that this election represents the start of a change in American politics, not the election itself. But I think it will end up being a catalyst. And I'm very curious, Lewis. I mean, we've had in the last few years a lot of things go on. We've gotten rid of one of the first just bizarre presidents with certainly just questionable basic intelligence. He left. We elected the first black president. We now are going to have the first orange Speaker of the House. We had the first real significant plethora of bizarre candidates like Carl Palladino and Christine O'Donnell. I don't know exactly what will happen in 2012, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be different and it's going to be fascinating.
Different in terms of the candidates we'll see?
The candidates will see how the elections will be run. I mean, we already saw in this election a little bit that it was acceptable. The level of racism that was acceptable certainly was ratcheted up. That was a change. The amount of crazy personal background that could still get you onto the final ballot certainly was slackened. I mean, we saw big changes this time around.
Right. Would you call that the dumbing down of politics, though?
Those aren't necessarily terms that I like to use, but certainly there's an infotainment component that is going on in news that we have seen. I mean, who is doing the best in news? The news that is visually the most compelling and most entertaining is what is doing the best.
And who are the candidates that get the most attention? The candidates that are the most outrageous?
The ones that
Usually.
well, I don't know that I agree with you. They do get attention, but the candidates that actually end up winning aren't the craziest, most outrageous ones. I mean,
That's true,
Jimmy
but I'm just talking
McMillan,
strictly in terms of media coverage.
in terms of quantity of coverage.
Right.
I don't think I agree with you. I mean, Jimmy McMillan, for the amount of coverage he got compared to, for example, I don't know, Marco Rubio, you would think Jimmy McMillan, if it was really about media attention, would have won. Obviously, he didn't even come in second.
Well, I'm not saying that, their elections depended on the media coverage that they received. I'm just saying, I mean, who did you see more media coverage of more than anybody this entire election?
Christine O'Donnell, right. And it didn't help
Clearly
her.
the most outrageous candidate.
Yeah, I guess and we have to figure in how much of a factor is it that she's a woman as well. I mean, is there more interest because she was a crazy female candidate versus a crazy male candidate? Maybe that attracted to the amount of attention.
I think so. It's like the Sarah Palin effect.
Exactly. So we'll talk about what's next. First, though, Lewis, winners and losers. Obvious loser in this election, Democratic incumbents. I mean, no question about it. We saw in blue counties and red counties, we can find Democratic incumbent losers just about anywhere. Winner, Wall Street. Many of the biggest Wall Street recipients won. Wall Street money recipients, that is. And we know, Lewis, what that will mean for Wall Street, do we not?
What's that?
We know exactly what more Wall Street money recipients winning will mean for Wall Street. More of the same, more favorable legislation, more pats on the back, less regulation.
Well, Wall Street, Obama did Wall Street a lot of favors too. So.
Well, we're opening up a whole other can of worms there. Astutely so, Lewis, but I don't want to get bogged down in that discussion. I want to continue.
Agreed.
Winners and losers. You know who I was glad to see in the losers list? The self-funders. Carly Fiorina, Meg Whitman, Linda McMahon. They all spent a ton of their own money, millions, $170 million, I believe, in Meg Whitman's case. Didn't win. Now, some women's groups, I've been getting some emails, some women's groups are not particularly happy with this, but they should be, since none of these women were really going to do anything for women's rights anyway. I mean, if we talk about reproductive rights, if we talk about income equality, Carly Fiorina, Meg Whitman, and Linda McMahon, trust me, I believe, are not the prominent female politicians that the women's rights movement should want.
And not that it's not important, but I mean, is women's rights really a priority, in the Senate right now? It's
not, no.
Yeah.
But certainly, and Whitman was trying to be the governor of California, but you're right. And certainly these women winning would not have made it a priority. And other clear losers, progressives. I mean, as Huffington Post's Ryan Grimm reported, this was a clear loss for progressives. Tom Perriello, hardworking freshman whose progressive values are deeply held, worked hard as anyone in Congress, passionately articulated and defended his votes, raised a ton of money, lost to literally an empty-headed country club Republican who didn't take a position on anything other than cut taxes, cut spending, cut taxes, cut spending. Who does that sound like? And Alan Grayson, again, Joe Sestak. I mean, it was progressive, certainly the losers. Winner, Sarah Palin. Even though her doppelganger, Christine O'Donnell, did lose, as did Sharon Angle, the perception is, as after doing poorly in the general election, Sarah Palin swept in and delivered victories across the country. And you know that Sarah Palin has power when she can get incompetent people who have no business making political decisions for anybody onto the final ballot. And regardless of what happens, Lewis, in the next 2 years, the 2010 midterms have helped Sarah Palin.
Oh, definitely.
In her potential run for 2012, as scary as that is. So let's take a break. Last loser as we go out here, gladly, the Nazi reenactors, witches, and people who say rape and incest are God's will. Take a break. We'll be back.
You're listening to The David Pakman Show.
Midweek Politics is made possible by listeners like you and by Greenfield Savings Bank, building a strong community one account at a time, with neighborhood offices in Greenfield, Amherst, Conway, Shelburne Falls, South Deerfield, and Turners Falls, and online at greenfieldsavings.com. By the Daily Hampshire Gazette and gazettenet.com, connecting our communities with local news and information. By DIF Design, specializing in custom business websites at difdesign.com. Find out more about underwriting midweek politics at midweekpolitics.com.